Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a stone-cold chamber deep in the heart of a medieval castle. Picture it, the wind howls outside, rattling the shutters like an angry spirit. The torches flicker weakly on damp gray walls. And you, yes, you are trying to fall asleep in a bed stuffed with straw, with nothing more than your coarse linen shift and the body heat of whoever you're lucky enough to sleep beside. No thick blanket, no electric heater, no fleece socks. Just centuries of brutal winter's stone walls that suck the warmth right out of your bones, and the constant fear that you might not make it till dawn. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you listening from and what time is it where you are? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It begins with a door creaking closed behind you. You're standing in a dim, arched hallway of a medieval stronghold, perhaps a 12th century Norman keep. The corridor is cold, and the stone beneath your bare feet feels like ice. You don't just feel the chill. It climbs up your legs like a living thing slipping under your tunic and pricking your skin with invisible needles. There's no insulation here, no warm carpet, no cozy hearth crackling nearby. Just the stale breath of centuries damp and unmoved. Tonight your bed awaits in one of the upper chambers, so you climb the spiral staircase, winding tightly like a snail shell past arrow slits that let in more cold than light. Your hand trails the mossy edge of the stone wall as you ascend. With each step, the cold deepens. You start to understand something unnerving. These castles weren't built for comfort. They were fortresses designed to keep invaders out, not to keep warmth in. And when you reach the chamber, you're almost disappointed. A wooden bed raised off the ground, yes, but it's not the lavish draped wonder of fairy tales. It's basic. A wooden frame stuffed with straw, or maybe rushes, lumpy and loud. The mattress might be wrapped in rough linen, and on top, if you're lucky, you'll find a single woolen cover, threadbare and scratchy. Forget plush pillows. You've got a bolster maybe filled with hay or feathers, but it smells faintly musty and has seen far too many winters. There's no glass in the windows, just shutters. And if they're open, even a crack, the wind whistles in like a ghost searching for warmth. The hearth in the corner is nearly useless. Its embers might give a dull glow, but don't expect any real heat. The draft pulls the fire's breath straight up the flue out into the night. You can sit as close as you want. Your back will still be cold, so how did they do it? How did people survive and sleep through these icy nights? They started by dressing smart or desperate. You wouldn't undress for bed unless you had a death wish. No one dared expose skin to the cold air. Instead, you wore your day's linen, maybe a wool tunic over it. Some even wore hats to bed. There are 14th century writings that joke about people who forgot their nightcaps and woke up with frozen ears. For the poor, sleep meant curling into tight bundles with as many family members as possible. In one cramped room, it was common for 3, 4, or even 5 people to share a bed. Body heat was the only reliable furnace. For the wealthier castle dwellers, nobles, stewards, or clerics, there was one trick up their sleeve: the canopy bed. It wasn't about luxury. That heavy fabric draped overhead and around the bed was a strategic design. It helped trap the heat from your breath and body, creating a small pocket of livable warmth. Without it, your breath would just vanish into the cold air above, taking precious warmth with it. But still, sleep came slowly. Your nose would burn from the chill and your toes would sting. You might tuck your hands under your armpits or between your thighs, anything to keep them warm. Your breath fogs the air. Every shift on the straw mattress rustles loudly in the otherwise silent night. You lie awake listening to the wind moaning through the tower slits, wondering if morning will come, or if this will be the night your body surrenders to the cold. Eventually, exhaustion wins. Your body, already taxed from a day of hard labor or castle duties, drags you into sleep, fitful, dreamless, deep. But it's not restful. You'll wake multiple times, shifting, curling tighter. Sometimes the cold would pull people into a sleep so deep they never woke again. To combat this, some castles installed elaborate arrangements around the fireplace, benches, wall tapestries, thick carpets. But all of this belonged only to the wealthiest few, and even they couldn't escape the cold entirely. The stone absorbed heat during the day, but at night it radiated nothing but bone-chilling air. And if you think the winters were bad, just wait for the damp. Rain soaked through roof tiles and walls. The air was often thick with mildew, and your blankets, if you had any, were likely clammy to the touch. The smell of mold of sweat, trapped in old wool, was inescapable. It mixed with the scent of old straw of chamber pots, emptied poorly of the bodies of others, curled up beside you, their breath steaming in the dark. No, there were no electric blankets, no hot water bottles, just endurance. The lucky few might have warmed stones near the hearth and carried them to bed wrapped in cloth. These could provide a fleeting bit of heat, but they cooled quickly, and unless you kept them tight against your skin, they were more of a mental comfort than a real one. So sleep became a kind of ritual of resistance. You didn't look forward to it. You braced yourself for it. Every night was a battle, every hour a negotiation with the elements. And yet, they survived. People adapted. Their bodies adjusted to the cold. Their expectations of comfort were nothing like ours. They didn't dream of heated blankets or memory foam mattresses. They dreamt of making it through the night without waking up blue and trembling. You lie there now in your borrowed medieval bed and begin to understand what it meant to sleep in a castle. Not like a king, not like a queen, but like someone caught between stone walls and a frozen world, hoping the sun would rise and your fingers wouldn't be too stiff to move by the time it did. And as you drift, wrapped in nothing but your shift and the faintest warmth from the hearth, a new sound reaches your ears, a distant clanging, faint and echoing down the corridor. It's the sound of iron-shod boots on the stone floor, faint but deliberate, coming from somewhere below. You pull your coarse blanket tighter instinctively, curling into yourself, hoping whoever's awake at this hour isn't coming for you. The noise fades, swallowed by the stone. You listen to the silence that follows the heavy kind, like the castle is holding its breath. And slowly, sleep tiptoes closer again, but not deeply. You wake again an hour later, your feet are numb. Not just cold, numb wooden. You shift them beneath the straw mattress, trying to find some forgotten pocket of warmth. Your breath clouds in the air above you. Somewhere behind the shutters, the wind hammers against the castle wall. The candle's gone out. You're not even sure how long you slept. And this is just an ordinary night. In medieval times, the idea of a full night's sleep was, well, a bit of a fantasy. People didn't sleep straight through the night. Historians call it segmented sleep. You'd sleep a few hours, wake for an hour or two, pray, stoke the fire, maybe even talk to your bedmates, then sleep again until dawn. It wasn't a flaw. It was the rhythm of life when the cold, the dark, and the danger wrapped around you like an extra layer of clothing. When sleep was divided, survival habits filled the gaps. If you were lucky enough to have a servant, they might come by to check the fire or bring warm stones wrapped in cloth still hot from the kitchen oven, which had been baking well into the night. If not, it was up to you to tiptoe to the hearth and poke the coals, careful not to wake the others sharing your bed or the floor around you. Because yes, the floor wasn't empty. Picture this: your bed may hold 2 or 3 people, but several others, children, workers, extended family, are curled in corners or stretched across rush-covered floors. The rushes, those long grasses spread over the stone, aren't just decorative. They were used in layers mixed with herbs, like lavender or chamomile, to keep pests away and absorb spills. You can smell them now, dry and earthy, layered over years of ash dust and sweat. If they've been changed this month, it's a blessing. If not, well, you'll know it. And these floors weren't quiet. People muttered in their sleep, turned over with sighs, shivered audibly. Rats skittered in the shadows. Fleas didn't care whether you were noble or poor. They made homes in both the hay and the bedding. So yes, you slept, but never entirely at peace. Now imagine you've made it to morning. Just barely. You sit up stiffly. Every joint aches. You breathe deeply, and the air still cuts your lungs like glass. No sun shines through the shutters. Maybe it's snowing. Maybe it's just another gray morning. Either way, your first task is simple: get out of bed. But in this room, that's no small feat. The shock of cold hits you like a wave. Your limbs are stiff, slow. You pull on boots or wrap your feet in scraps of wool or linen. If you're lucky, someone lit the kitchen hearth early. But you can't smell bread yet, and that means no one's up. So you shuffle toward the nearest pitcher of water, intending to splash your face awake, only to find the surface frozen solid. You sigh. It'll take fire to crack that ice, and fire takes effort. All around you, these little battles played out every morning. In castles across Europe, whether you were in a drafty Scottish keep or a fog-choked French chateau, mornings started with a struggle. To warm your feet, to coax the hearth to life, to prepare your body for another day that would end in another frozen night. But this wasn't seen as misery, not exactly. It was normal. Take the example of the medieval warming pan. It's not in your room tonight, but maybe you remember seeing one, an old brass dish with a long wooden handle. Servants would fill it with hot coals and slide it between the bed sheets before the lord or lady climbed in. Not out of luxury, out of necessity, and not for long either. Those sheets could smolder or catch fire if left unattended. You had to know the balance: just enough heat to warm your bones, not enough to kill you in your sleep. Some families even kept small dogs, not just for companionship, but as living hot water bottles. These lapdogs, literally bred for warmth, would sleep at their owner's feet or under their skirts. Their small bodies radiated precious heat, and in the coldest corners of stone castles that mattered more than you'd think. But even the best tricks couldn't solve the structural truth: stone is an unforgiving material. It doesn't warm. It leaches heat out of everything it touches. That's why medieval builders eventually began incorporating wall hangings, massive tapestries that weren't just decorative but acted as insulation. You glance up at one now, or the woven image of some legendary hunt or biblical parable swaying slightly as a breeze sneaks in around the window frame. Behind that tapestry, a cold wall that might as well be the side of a glacier. Some rooms had thick carpets, not like the ones you're imagining. These were animal skins, woven mats, layers of old clothing. The goal wasn't beauty, it was warmth, and still it rarely worked. So what about layering clothes? Surely that helped, yes and no. Wool was the medieval miracle fabric. Everyone wore it, and it was often the only thing standing between you and hypothermia. But not all wool was created equal. If you were poor, it was coarse, itchy, and badly dyed. It held in warmth, yes, but it held in moisture, too. Once it was wet from snow, rain, or your own sweat, it took forever to dry. You could go to bed in damp wool and wake up with frozen limbs. And you didn't own much. Maybe 2 sets of clothes, 3 if you were blessed. So if one got soaked, you wore the other while hoping the first would dry near the fire. If the fire never lit, you'd sleep in it anyway. There's no romantic glow here, no medieval hygge, just the survival logic of layers and shared warmth, of bedding stuffed with straw and hands that never quite thaw out. You curl back under the coarse wool blanket. It smells of smoke, of earth, of years of winter. There's a noise in the corridor again, someone waking a servant, maybe off to the kitchens. You don't want to move. Your body is stiff, but your mind is finally sinking into the rhythm. The silence. The cold. You're starting to get it now, aren't you? What it really meant to sleep in a medieval castle. Not just enduring the cold, but learning to live in it. Learning to share breath and bed space. Learning that comfort as we know it today simply didn't exist. You close your eyes again, not to escape, but to imagine what it would take to survive one more night. And as sleep brushes up against you once again, you hear the faint creak of another door. It's the slow groan of a wooden door easing open down the hall, old hinges complaining as someone slips out into the corridor. A servant, maybe, or a child needing the privy. The air that rushes in as the door opens is colder than the rest of the room, and even though you're not the one who moved, you feel the draft bite across your cheeks. You tug the blanket tighter again. Your toes have finally warmed barely, but now your nose is cold. It always is. There's a strange law of medieval physics. No matter how tightly you burrow into the bed, some part of you always remains exposed, and that's the part the cold claims first. You begin to think about the daily preparations people had to make, not just for living, but for sleeping. Because in the medieval world, nighttime wasn't merely the end of the day. It was a threat. The sun left, and with it went your best source of light and warmth. The night belonged to the cold, to thieves, to spirits and dangers both real and imagined. So people prepared. In the hours before sunset, as the sky turned that bruised purple over the castle's towers, the household moved with purpose. Fires had to be stoked and banked hot enough to last a while, but low enough not to burn the place down. Windows had to be shuttered tightly. Rushes spread more evenly. The chamber pot emptied. Water brought in. Stones for heating lined along the kitchen hearth. You can almost hear the distant clatter of servants in the lower hall, their soft footfalls muted by layers of worn wool wrapped around their shoes. They move through routine like clockwork, not because they want to, because they must. If you forget even one small task, one ember unguarded, one door left cracked open, it could mean waking to a room too cold to move in. Or worse. This was especially true during the heart of winter. The long months when the sun seemed too weak to do anything, when snow blew sideways through the gaps in the shutters, and when the idea of crawling into bed early wasn't a luxury, but a survival mechanism. And so bedtimes were different too. Without artificial light, people went to bed shortly after sunset, maybe an hour or two later. Candles were expensive. Oil even more so. Torches smoked and filled the room with soot. No one wasted them. You learned to live with shadows. Imagine this, the fire is now banked low. The coals glow dull and steady like tired eyes. A single candle remains burning on a small table near the bed, just enough to find your footing in the dark. You can't read. There's no point. Books are rare and precious, and your hands are too stiff to hold one anyway. So instead, you lie back. Maybe someone tells a story. Maybe it's a prayer. Maybe it's just silence. And then, of course, there are the bugs. We don't think about them when we imagine castles, do we? But in these drafty, damp stone structures, bugs were a nightly nuisance. Bed bugs nested in the seams of old mattresses. Fleas clung to the straw. Lice lived on the bodies of those you slept beside. And you did sleep beside them whether you wanted to or not. A typical noble family might have one large bed, and all the younger children would sleep together packed like sardines under a single coarse blanket. If you were wealthy, you might have your own chamber, but privacy wasn't warmth. Solitude meant no one to share body heat with, and there were dangers to sleeping alone. Imagine waking in the pitch dark to the scratch of something scurrying across your feet, or the soft plop of water dripping from the ceiling into a corner of the room, consistent, slow, relentless. Or worse, silence so complete it feels like pressure against your chest. That silence could grow thick with worry. Night was when your thoughts came alive. What if there were thieves climbing the walls? What if a fire broke out and no one noticed until it was too late? What if the person beside you coughed again, the same wet, rattling sound they made last night? What if it was the plague? Yes, the plague. The Black Death haunted these cold castle nights. It taught people that sleep wasn't a promise. It was a risk. You might not wake. Or worse, someone else might not wake and you'd lie beside their body for hours before realizing. In those times, sleep was both a blessing and a surrender. To make peace with sleep in this world, people invented rituals, superstitions, charms. Perhaps you'd tuck a small relic or rosary beneath your bolster. Whisper a certain prayer 3 times. Or you'd hang a small bag of herbs by the bed, lavender, rosemary, sage. Not just for scent, but for protection. Against the cold. Against disease. Against whatever spirits the night might carry in. Some castles employed night watchmen, not just for protection, but to tend the fires. You can hear the muffled clang of one now tapping his iron staff on the floor as he passes by. He carries a small lantern and checks each corridor for open flames or sleeping servants who forgot their duties. The faint glow of his lamp dances along the wall for a moment before disappearing again into darkness. And still, despite all this, people adapted. Their bodies adjusted to colder temperatures. Children were taught young how to curl into themselves, how to layer woolen shifts under their tunics, how to breathe shallow in the night air to avoid coughing fits. Adults learned the trick of wrapping their cloaks around their feet first, then tucking the ends around their bellies. Everyone knew to sleep facing the wall. It blocked the breeze and gave a faint illusion of safety. And perhaps strangest of all, many began to love the cold. Not because it was pleasant, but because it became familiar, predictable. You knew the rhythm, fingers numb, then burning, then warm. breath visible then vanishing into dark. You knew how long it took for your toes to thaw, for your ears to ache, for the blankets to stop feeling like stone. You don't resist it now. You've sunk into the rhythm. The itchy wool no longer scratches. The rushes don't bother your nose. Even the sounds of movement in the corridor blend into something almost comforting, a kind of medieval lullaby. You close your eyes again, this time prepared. Prepared to dream, even if it's only for a few hours before the bells ring out to announce morning. Before the chill becomes a command and the castle wakes again to another day of life carved out of stone. And somewhere deep in the tower above you, the wind moans like a choir of ghosts. And you swear the sound is almost melodic. That eerie chorus of wind slipping through ancient cracks in the stone, circling the battlements, dipping down the flues. It sings a lullaby no one ever asked for, but everyone knew by heart. It's the music of medieval sleep, not gentle, not soothing, but constant. Like the world reminding you that while your eyes may close, the cold never rests. You shift beneath the coarse wool once again. The chill has worked its way back to your bones as it always does. But you're not surprised anymore. You've stopped fighting it. There's something oddly reassuring in the repetition. The discomfort is predictable. The stone doesn't lie. It is what it is, and it will never be anything else. Your fingers trace the edge of the blanket. You imagine what it took to create even that scratchy comfort. A blanket in the medieval world wasn't just a fabric. It was the product of labor days of shearing, carding, spinning, dyeing, and weaving. It might have been passed down stitched with the initials of a grandmother, or patched dozens of times. There were no factories, no surplus, no shelves stocked with soft fleece. Every item was personal, imperfect, and precious. In poorer households, even this level of comfort would have been rare. Peasants often slept in their clothing curled against hearths, children nestled against parents with livestock, sometimes just beyond a wooden partition. The cow's warmth, ironically, might be the most dependable source of heat. You wouldn't laugh at that. You'd be thankful. But here in the stone chamber of a minor castle, you're caught between those two worlds. Not poor, not rich. Not protected, not exposed. You have the bones of a bed, a rough wool cover, and maybe a little fire left in the hearth. Still, sleep was a delicate thing. Even the bed itself had its own personality. Creaky wooden joints. Straw that rustled with every breath. Mattresses weren't fluffy. They were bags stuffed with whatever was available, straw hay, or if you were lucky, feathers. But feathers came with their own problems. They poked through the fabric, they smelled, they flattened quickly. And when wet, they were worse than useless. So for many, straw was the safer bet. It was easy to replace, though replacing it meant hauling new bundles from the fields, drying them and stuffing them by hand. And you feel it now, every time you shift. The straw crinkles and squeaks beneath you. It's not unpleasant. It's just loud. In a room so silent, every rustle sounds like thunder. So you lie still. Very still. There's a reason medieval people believed the devil moved in silence. Too much quiet was unnerving. Which is why people whispered prayers before sleep, not just to ask for protection, but to fill the air with something familiar. A voice, a breath, anything to ward off that unnerving stillness. You murmur a fragment now, not even sure what it means, just syllables learned by rhythm, not understanding. But these rituals were vital. The evening Angelus bell might have already rung before you crawled into bed. That sound, echoing across the countryside, told the entire region it was time to settle in, to let the world slow. The sound of bells marked time in a world with no clocks, no smartphones, no glowing numbers blinking by the bedside. And as night deepened, so did the darkness. Dark in the Middle Ages wasn't a gentle dim. It was a devouring velvet black. There were no streetlights outside the castle, no city glow bouncing off the clouds. If the moon wasn't full, the darkness was absolute. And your candle, that tiny flickering stub of tallow, was precious. You wouldn't burn it just to chase the shadows. You'd ration it. Sometimes you'd hold it for hours unlit, just so you could sleep, knowing you had light, if something startled you awake. It's hard to explain how powerful darkness becomes when it's complete. You lie back watching nothing, feeling everything. You hear your breath, someone else's. The fire's faint crackle, that wind again, maybe a drip from somewhere above. Every sound is magnified, and every sound holds a question. Is that someone moving, or just the old beams settling? Did something scrape outside? Or is your mind inventing noises this uncertainty was part of every night? And it's why in medieval belief, nighttime was the domain of spirits. Witches were said to walk at night, ghosts too, and demons. The line between dream and waking was often blurred. Sleep paralysis, nightmares, and the cold hand of fear were explained as nightly visitations. You wouldn't scoff at those stories if you lived here. You'd nod. Of course, something tried to press on your chest. Of course, something whispered in your ear. How could it not in this world? You pull the blanket over your head, just for a moment. You listen to your breath against the fabric. Hot, close, safe, and still. The cold presses in from every side. It always finds its way. Even in the warmest chambers, those used by lords and ladies, there was no real insulation. Tapestries helped. So did carpets and canopies and servants carrying coals in brass pots. But the stone never softened. The night never relented. It's strange to think that what we call comfort today would have been unimaginable here. A mattress that conforms to your spine pillows. You can sink into central heating. None of it, even the most luxurious castle bed draped in furs and velvet, couldn't rival a modern sleeping bag in terms of actual warmth. But expectations were different. Comfort wasn't measured in temperature or softness. It was measured in survival. Did you sleep without waking from frostbite? Did the fire stay lit? Did the baby beside you breathe evenly through the night? Did no one cough blood? If so, it was a good night. And as your eyes begin to close again, you remember that sleep in this world was less about rest and more about endurance. It was a pause in the day's labor, yes, but it wasn't a refuge. It was just another battlefield, quiet and cold. The straw rustles again as you shift. Your back aches. Your nose is cold. Your feet have gone numb again. But your mind has stilled. The rhythm of medieval night has taken hold. Outside, the wind's chorus rises again, and you begin to dream not in colors, not in warmth, but in shadows and flickers and whispers. Your dream begins with a whisper, the kind that might be wind or might be words, and you're not quite sure which. It comes from the corner of the chamber beyond the edge of the hearth's dying glow. Maybe it's a memory. Maybe it's something older. Either way, it disappears as quickly as it arrived, and you turn in your sleep, half awake, half lost, in a world where cold and imagination bleed together. This is the strange part of sleeping in a medieval castle. The nights are long, but your sense of time is all wrong. You wake often, but not entirely. You drift in and out of consciousness, not with the ease of a nap, but with the weight of survival. You're not resting so much as recovering slowly, shakily, like someone who's been treading water in the middle of a storm. And while you lie there in the darkness, you realize the architecture itself worked against sleep. These weren't cozy cottages. They were vast stone vaults designed to intimidate. The ceilings soared high above your head. The walls echoed even the smallest sound. The wind didn't whisper around them, it slammed into them. Every creak, every groan of timber, every gust through a loose shutter was amplified, transformed into something eerie. Some of these towers were so high and exposed, the upper chambers collected wind like a funnel. Drafts weren't an occasional nuisance, they were a feature. Curtains and canopies would shudder in the night, not because someone was moving, but because the castle was breathing cold. You lie there fully awake again, now feeling every one of those architectural decisions pressing down on you. You wonder who decided that sleeping at the top of a tower, surrounded by stone and exposed to every winter squall, was a good idea. But there were reasons, some practical, some paranoid. Lords wanted distance from the noise and smell of the lower levels. They also wanted height for defense. If trouble came in the night, they needed to see it first. But that height meant wind and stone, and above all, isolation. No one would hear you whisper for help up here, so you whisper to yourself instead. Maybe a fragment of a prayer, maybe just your own name. Anything to prove you're still awake, still alive. And somewhere below you, in the guts of the castle, life stirs. The kitchens, for example, never truly sleep. Even now, in the dark hours before dawn, you can imagine the scullions rising young barefoot, shivering as they stumble toward the hearths. They'll light fires, stir ashes, pour buckets, prepare for a day of endless boiling, baking, and scrubbing. Their beds were likely nothing more than a pile of rags in a corner. Sleep for them was a luxury measured in minutes, not hours. You can almost smell it, the faint scent of smoked bread and damp earth drifting upward through the walls. It mixes with the must of old rushes and the sour wool of your blanket. The medieval world was never sterile. It had texture, odor, weight. You lived close to everything, to your family, to your filth, to your fears. In fact, you probably hadn't bathed in days, maybe weeks. No one had. It wasn't that people didn't care about cleanliness. They simply had no good options. Baths were rare cold and reserved for occasions. So instead, bodies were bundled under layers of clothing, sweat trapped beneath wool and linen. That scent clung to the bedding, to the room, to the very air you breathed. You shift again, one hand against the wall beside your bed. Cold. Always cold. But you realize something else, too. In this world, people learn to share everything: space, breath, warmth, sound. Privacy didn't exist. Even a noble's chamber would see servants slipping in at odd hours, carrying warming pans or extra firewood. Your sleep was never your own. It belonged to the rhythms of the castle. Even the bells ruled you. Yes, bells. The monastic hours defined medieval life, even in castles that weren't religious centers. The night was divided into chunks, compline matins lauds. Each came with its own bell. You might not have known the exact time, but you knew the sounds. And now you hear it faint, muffled through stone, but unmistakable, a bell tolling in the chapel far below. Maybe matins. That early hour of half-sleep and whispered Latin. It means the monks or chaplains are rising now, shuffling toward the cold, dark chapel to chant the psalms. While you fight for warmth in bed, they fight for focus in prayer. But the bell serves another purpose too. It reminds you that time is passing, that this night, like all the others, will eventually end. You wonder how children survived this, not just physically, but mentally. The dark could be terrifying at any age, but for the young, it must have been overwhelming. Parents taught them early to fear certain things: open windows, nighttime spirits, the sound of wolves. But they also taught them rituals, blessings, charms, superstitions. You remember some now half buried in your mind. Cross your arms before sleep to keep the spirits away. Don't speak aloud after midnight. Never leave a door ajar. These weren't just stories. They were survival tools in a world where science didn't explain the cold or the cough, or the sudden stillness of someone who had seemed fine just hours earlier. The fire is nearly out now. All that remains are a few glowing coals flickering like tired eyes in the dark. The warmth they give is minimal, but still your eyes are drawn to them. They pulse gently, hypnotically. You think about the generations of people who stared into fires like this, century after century, night after night, finding comfort in their glow even if it couldn't chase away the chill. You lie there still and silent. The cold has won tonight, as it always does, but you've learned its rules. You've stopped fighting and started adapting. You shift your body to where the straw feels less compressed. You pull the blanket so it traps more air. You tuck your hands between your thighs. All the small tricks of 1,000 years. And slowly, so slowly, you begin to drift again. Not because you're warm, but because you've stopped expecting to be. And in the strange, suspended state of medieval slumber where time bends and breath clouds the air, you finally give in not to comfort, but to the kind of rest that comes from acceptance. The wind softens, the coals flicker, the castle sighs, and sleep, strange and shallow and cold, wraps itself around you once more, until something wakes you again. Not sound, not movement, just the sensation and awareness in your chest that the air around you has grown colder. The coals have faded completely now. Nothing but gray ash in the hearth, like the ghost of a fire long gone. You shiver involuntarily, and the motion sends a crackle through the straw beneath you. The blanket slips a little. Cold air floods in like water through a hole in a ship. You fumble to pull the cover up again, but it's stiff now. Damp, maybe. Or just frozen around the edges. In a place like this, moisture lingers everywhere. The castle breathes with you. And when you exhale, it exhales too with air that's just a few degrees colder than death. And yet somehow people called this home. It wasn't just the lords and ladies cloaked in velvets and surrounded by servants. Whole communities lived within these walls: cooks, guards, washerwomen, grooms, children, scribes. Some slept in upper chambers like yours, others in basements near barrels of grain or racks of tools. Wherever there was space, there was a body, and wherever there was a body, there was the struggle to stay warm. You think of the guards now, the poor souls stationed on the parapets or in the gatehouses. They didn't have straw mattresses or even wool blankets. They had cloaks. Leather, if they were lucky. And they paced not to pass time but to keep their blood moving. They stamped their feet, swung their arms, beat their chests. The cold wasn't just uncomfortable, it was dangerous. A distracted guard was a dead one, but even they had it better than prisoners. Down below, buried deep beneath the castle, were the dungeons. Just the thought makes you flinch. Stone cells with no fires, no blankets, no straw, just darkness, dampness, and chains. If you were thrown in there in winter, sleep wasn't even a concept. Survival became a second-by-second struggle. People froze in those cells, curled up in corners and never woke again. And yet here you are lying in a bed. Rough, yes. Freezing, yes. But a bed all the same. A privilege by medieval standards. And as you lie there cocooned in your scratchy wool and layered linen, you start to think about what warmth meant to them. Because in the Middle Ages, warmth wasn't just physical. It was spiritual, emotional, symbolic. A lit hearth meant protection. It meant the home was secure, tended alive. In religious manuscripts, fire often represented divine presence. The hearth was sacred, a place of stories, of prayers, of family. It's why castles were designed with a central hall, so the fire and everything it represented was at the heart of life. But once the fire died, the meaning shifted. The room became vulnerable. The shadows pressed closer. Without the crackle and glow, the cold took on a personality, something creeping, searching, hungry. You pull your knee up toward your chest. Somewhere outside the chamber, a shutter bangs softly. It's rhythmic. The wind toys with it, opening at a crack, then letting it fall closed again. Like breath. In. Out. You wonder what the walls would hum if they could speak. These stones have seen centuries of sleep and waking. They've held the warmth of 1,000 fires, and the last breaths of the ones who never made it through the night. The stories they could tell about who shared this bed before you and who might after. Because beds were shared. Not just between spouses, between siblings, cousins, guests, servants. Sharing a bed wasn't intimate, it was practical. In fact, it was encouraged. More bodies meant more heat. Even in noble households, it wasn't uncommon for visiting dignitaries to sleep 2 or 3 to a bed. The idea of personal space would have sounded like a joke. And if you didn't have someone to sleep with, you'd find something. A dog, a bundle of warm stones, a stolen fur, or just the memory of the last night you were truly warm. But there were occasional luxuries. In wealthier castles, a truckle bed might be pulled out from under the main bed, a smaller frame for a servant to sleep nearby, ready to wake at a moment's notice. The master would ring a bell, and the servant would rise, stoke the fire, retrieve a forgotten blanket, bring warm wine. Warm wine. You smile at the thought. Not because it sounds appetizing now, but because it was another method of medieval sleep aid. Spiced wine heated by the hearth and taken just before bed helped warm the belly and quiet the mind. It was thick sometimes, too sweet, and often fortified with herbs meant to induce drowsiness. And if wine wasn't an option, there were other potions, some deadly, some questionable. Poppy syrup, chamomile infusion, elderflower. These weren't indulgences, they were attempts to outpace the cold long enough to slip into sleep before it claimed you. You sigh. None of those tonight. Just you, the cold, and time. It's strange how much silence there is in a place like this. Even with the wind and the occasional creak, there's a stillness to the world. No hum of electricity. No cars outside. No distant music. Just layers of quiet. And in that quiet, your thoughts drift to summer. What would this chamber feel like then? Would the stone finally warm in the sun? Would the air smell of lavender instead of smoke and mold? Would the bedding be lighter, or would the same heavy wool still press down on you, familiar and inescapable? Even in summer nights could be cold in these castles. Thick walls kept the heat out, as well as the cold in, which meant sleeping always required the same strategy layer curl. Wait. You think again of the tapestry hanging near the bed. It hasn't moved in a while. Maybe the wind has settled, or maybe your body has finally adjusted. Maybe. And just as that thought lands, something shifts within you or around you. You can't tell. But suddenly, the cold no longer feels aggressive. It's just present, like part of the room, like another piece of furniture. You don't welcome it, but you acknowledge it. Like a stubborn guest who refuses to leave, and so eventually you offer them a chair. You pull the blanket up one last time, tuck your knees in, curl into yourself like the hundreds before you did in this same bed or one like it. And slowly your breathing steadies. The castle holds its breath. And this time sleep comes quickly, not because you are warm, but because you've learned how not to be. And somewhere far above you, a raven cries into the last hours of night. A long, low caw that echoes down the turrets and disappears into the darkness. You don't even stir this time. Not anymore. You've grown used to the strange sounds of night. The castle is alive in its own way, creaking and whispering like an ancient, weary beast. It shifts, it settles, it sighs through the stones. And you, small, shivering, wrapped in your wool and linen, are just one of many souls it's held through the centuries. Sleep has become more rhythm than rest. A practice, a learned thing. Your body doesn't expect comfort anymore. It expects cold. It expects to wake in the dark. It expects to stretch frozen fingers and listen to every noise. And yet, as you lie in that narrow bed, something has shifted. You're no longer shocked by the chill. You've started to trust it, to understand it. Outside, the wind has softened to a breeze brushing gently against the shuttered windows. The moaning has stopped. It's quieter now, colder, but calmer. Inside the chamber, the coals are nothing more than blackened lumps, no longer glowing. But a faint warmth still clings to the hearthstones like a ghost of fire. You can smell it ash smoke and char, a medieval perfume. It settles into the linens, the walls, even your hair. You smell like the room, like the castle, like the age. And yet not all castles were created equal. Not all sleep was as hard won as this. In the great royal halls, the kings and queens had elaborate bedchambers, tapestries from floor to ceiling, thick rugs layered over cold flagstones, fur pelts stacked high atop feather beds. They had warming pans, thick quilts, and roaring fireplaces that were kept alive all night by sleepy servants. But even there, the cold remained. You can't outspend the winter. You can only brace for it. And below the royalty, the nobility and clergy had their own strategies. Some had private chambers while others slept communally in dormitories. Monasteries, for instance, followed strict schedules, rising in the dead of night for matins praying before shivering back into bed. Silence was mandatory. Even in the dark, even when your fingers ached from frost, your voice remained in your throat. That silence, enforced, disciplined, made sleep something monastic. Holy even. To sleep was to relinquish control to enter the night with humility. You didn't command comfort. You accepted discomfort as part of the rhythm of life. And then there were the children. Most of them didn't have beds at all. Young boys, daughters, servants' children, they slept where there was space on the floor, on benches curled in corners, sometimes near the fireplace if the Lord allowed it. They shared rough woolen blankets or nothing at all. Their bodies adjusted quickly. They were taught from birth not to complain. A cold child who cried too much in the night would find themselves outside or worse, ignored entirely. You picture a little boy now tucked beneath a table, curled beside a dog. His breath curls in the dark. He's not afraid. He's just cold. But that's normal. That's life. His parents are snoring nearby, one curled around the other, their limbs wound together for heat. No one stirs. The silence is complete. And there's a strange peace in that. A peace born of routine. Of knowing that everyone else everywhere was going through the same thing. Castles weren't isolated in their suffering. Every household across the medieval world fought the same enemy each night, the cold. So people got creative. There were foot warmers made of wood and iron filled with hot coals and slid under benches or beds. There were heavy hoods and sleep caps worn tight around the head. Some even slept sitting up, leaning against walls wrapped in cloaks and furs. Anything to avoid lying flat on a bed of ice. And then there were beds built into walls, box beds with doors that closed like cupboards. In some regions, especially in the north, these became popular not for privacy, but to trap warmth. You'd climb in close, the little doors, and let your breath fill the space like a tiny oven. Claustrophobic, yes, but warmer than the open room. You reach now for the idea of warmth. Not physical warmth, your fingers are stiff, your toes unfeeling, but the memory of it. You think of sunlit fields, summer days, the smell of bread rising in a warm kitchen. You try to conjure that warmth into your chest. It helps a little. You lie there like that, suspended between thought and sleep. And you realize something else the cold teaches: slowness. You can't move quickly when your joints are stiff. You can't leap from bed. Everything must be done gradually. Breathing, shifting, stretching. It turns your body into something cautious, something aware. And because of that slowness, people listened more. They watched the flame. They measured time not in hours, but in changes of light. The fading of coals, the creak of walls, the quiet rustle of straw. You hear that rustle now, soft, steady, as someone in another chamber turns in their bed. A low murmur follows. A name, maybe, or a dream spoken aloud. You're not alone in the castle, not by a long shot. But the stone makes everyone feel distant, like voices arriving from another time. And there's the danger of dreams. Medieval people didn't see dreams the way we do. To them, dreams were messages sometimes from God, sometimes from the devil, sometimes from the dead. A nightmare could be a warning, a good dream a blessing. They were catalogued, interpreted, feared. Some even refused to share their dreams aloud, afraid they'd give them power. You wonder what your dream meant. The whisper in the corner, the wind that seemed to call your name. You won't speak of it, not yet. Instead, you focus on your breath again, slow, shallow. Your hands curl against your chest, seeking warmth that isn't there. Your mind begins to drift once more, not away from the cold, but through it, like a fish slipping through deep, dark water. Sleep returns, not soft, not sweet, but earned. And in that gray space between now and dawn, you finally stop searching for comfort. You've become part of the castle now. And outside the breeze turns once again to wind whispering secrets through the towers. Low and steady now, like a voice that never rests. It threads through the highest towers, slips under the doorframe, and curls against your cheeks like cold breath. But this time it doesn't jolt you awake. Not anymore. It's become part of the lullaby, one of the many sounds of this ancient place. The wind, the stone, the sigh of straw shifting as someone rolls over in the room beside yours. They all blend into the rhythm of the night. You feel your body sink further into the scratchy, uneven mattress. The straw beneath you has compacted into awkward shapes. Some parts poke, others sag. Your hip rests against a hard patch. Your shoulder finds a soft dip. You don't try to fix it. You've learned by now that moving only makes it worse, disturbs the few warm pockets your body has made. And even if you wanted to adjust, your joints wouldn't let you. They ache from hours spent curled tight against the cold. You stretch slightly, then stop. Every movement costs warmth. You lie still instead. Let the bed hold you in its awkward, ancient shape. The darkness is still complete. There is no light, only your memory of what the room looks like. The wall to your right lined with stones so thick they swallow sound. The shuttered window to your side probably rimmed with frost by now. The hearth at your feet cold as a grave, and the door closed but never sealed. There's always a draft there, always. But in your stillness, your awareness sharpens. You start to notice small things, the way your breath makes the blanket rise, the slight warmth under your knees, the scent of old wool and extinguished fire, the sound of something dripping from somewhere high in the tower, slow and rhythmic like a ticking clock from a time before clocks ticked. And then you remember you're not supposed to sleep the whole night through. This idea of a full night's rest didn't exist here. People spoke of first sleep and second sleep. The first stretch lasted a few hours. Then, after waking around midnight, people would stay up for a while, an hour, sometimes two, praying, talking, stoking the fire, even tending to chores. It was quiet time, reflective time, time suspended in the hush of midnight. And then they would return to bed for second sleep. You're in that gap now, that middle stretch of night where the world breathes differently. In this moment, you feel what they must have felt, not restless, but calm. Not disturbed, but aware. You rise carefully. The blanket falls away in slow motion, and the cold slams into you like a wave. Every inch of skin it touches prickles with the sting of sudden exposure. You grit your teeth and swing your legs down. Your feet touch the stone floor, and it's worse than you remember. Not just cold, wet cold. The kind that seeps in and settles deep in your bones. But you move anyway. You shuffle to the hearth, crouching low, to where the coals once lived. There's nothing now but a dull gray ash, soft as dust. You dig through it, hoping for a glow, a spark, something to coax back to life. But there's nothing. The fire is dead. So you wait. You wrap your cloak tighter around your shoulders, pull your knees to your chest, and sit on the floor. Your breath floats in little clouds. You can see it more clearly here in front of the hearth, where the air is a shade colder. This is where the mind begins to wander. You think of stories told in kitchens and halls about what happened in the darkest hours. The hour of wolves, some called it. The hour when spirits were most likely to walk. When the sick worsened. When the dying slipped away. When the frost crept higher up the windows and the fireless rooms grew still and fearful. That's why some didn't sleep at all during this time. They kept watch. Not out of duty, but out of dread. Watching the shadows. Watching each other. Watching the sky, waiting for the first hint of dawn. You glance toward the shuttered window. Still dark. Still deep in the night. No promise of morning yet. So you stay by the hearth, remembering how people endured. In castles, when fires failed, servants sometimes brought in braziers, metal bowls of glowing coals set on iron legs. They radiated heat, but also danger. One wrong move and the bed curtains could catch fire. One stumble, and the floor would smolder for hours unnoticed. Fires in castles were not just feared, they were common. Many great halls were lost to them. That's why stone dominated everything. Wood burned. Stone didn't. And yet the cold claimed more lives than fire ever did, especially among the young and old, especially in years when harvests failed and the body had no reserves. You might go to bed with cold toes and wake up with no feeling in your hands. Or worse, your brother next to you doesn't wake up at all. Still, people return to their beds every night, knowing the risks, trusting in their routines. You rise again, slowly, limbs stiff, muscles aching. You pad back to the bed and slip beneath the blanket, gasping slightly at the shock. The warmth you built earlier is gone. You must start again. Curl tightly. Tuck the wool under your chin. Find the hollow your body made in the mattress and wait for your heat to return. And as you lie there trying to remember how to fall asleep again, you realize something else. They didn't dream of warmth the way we do. They dreamed of survival, of health, of harvest. Warmth wasn't a fantasy, it was a task. Something you earned, something you built and maintained and defended. A fire to tend, a child to bundle, a window to seal. There was no luxury in it, just life. Your eyelids grow heavy again. The cold hasn't left, but it's changed. It's become your blanket now. Not soft, not kind, but constant, reliable, honest. The second sleep begins. Not with comfort, but with surrender. You stop resisting the cold and you let it hold you. Let it remind you that you are alive in a world that takes work. Outside, the wind has gone quiet again, and somewhere far beneath your chamber, in the deepest part of the castle, a dog barks once, then silence. You drift into dreams where even the cold has memory. Dreams that don't come in color, but in fog. In the soft gray of pre-dawn hours where memory and imagination melt into one another. You dream of heat, not fire, but the gentle warmth of breath of a body beside yours. But it's fleeting. You reach for it, and it's gone. Only the cold remains. A cold so old it feels like part of your blood now. You shift beneath the blanket and realize it's stiff again. Not from ice, but from sheer stillness. Wool that has hardened into shape around your form. You try to move your legs, but they stick for a moment, before they loosen like hinges that haven't been oiled in years. The silence is deeper now. The kind that comes just before the world stirs again. You know without knowing how that dawn is near. The air has changed. Still frigid, but not quite so sharp. There's a subtle softness to it, as if the night is beginning to loosen its grip on the castle. And yet sleep still holds you, not tightly, but in threads. You drift in and out, your mind floating between then and now, between your body and the centuries it has somehow joined through this night. You think of others who've done the same, faced the same stone walls, the same bitter wind. Their names are forgotten, but their sleep was the same. Some in castles like this, others in monasteries, farm cottages, roadside inns, but all of them wrapped in wool, tucked against the cold, fighting for slumber in a world where nightfall was not a time for rest, but a test of endurance. In some parts of Europe, people believed that sleeping too deeply during winter was dangerous. They warned against letting your limbs fall numb, against lying too still, against trusting the silence. Death, they believed, crept quietly in the cold, first into your toes, then your fingers, then your breath. So you move now. Just a little. Enough to prove you're still here. Your foot brushes against something. Not straw. Not wool. Something warm. A hand. It startles you. But only for a moment. Then you remember you're not alone. You're sharing this bed. Of course you are. You don't turn to look. You don't speak, and in this age, conversation at night was rare. You didn't wake someone if it wasn't urgent. Words belonged to daylight. At night, warmth was the only language. You leave your hand there. Skin against skin. The warmth spreads slowly. Not enough to thaw you, but enough to remind you you're alive. And that was everything. In castles like these, bed sharing was a necessity, not a sign of intimacy. Families, servants, and even strangers bundled together sometimes without ever exchanging names. The cold made quick friends of everyone. And this room, small, stone, and silent, was not unusual. Most sleeping chambers in castles were spare even for nobility. A bed, a trunk, a stool, maybe a candle holder on the wall if you were lucky. Tapestries if you were very lucky, but not much more. And even the bed, this lumpy, straw-filled thing, wasn't yours alone. Furniture was expensive, precious. You might share this mattress with different people from week to week. It might belong to the family or the household, not the individual. It would be passed down, repaired, restuffed, moved from chamber to chamber as needed. You imagine who else has slept here? Who else has stared at the same ceiling, heard the same wind curled against the same cold wall. Maybe a soldier exhausted after patrol. Maybe a maid still dusted in flour from the kitchens. Maybe a noblewoman coughing softly through the night, feverish and wrapped in furs. Maybe a child gripping a carved toy beneath the covers. This bed has held them all, and now it holds you. It's strange how timeless this all feels. Yes, you're freezing. Yes, your limbs ache. But somehow, in the stillness, in the shared breath of the room, you've slipped into something ancient, something universal. The medieval night has pulled you in not as a visitor, but as one of its own. You lie still again. There's no reason to move. You're warm enough. You're safe enough. You're part of the quiet now. But your mind keeps drifting to the hearth. Cold as it is, it still holds meaning. The heart of the home, the center of life. Even dead, it anchors the room. Everything is arranged around it. The bed, the stool, even the people. You don't gather around light, not in this world. You gather around heat. You think of the stories told at that hearth. Not tonight, but on other nights, when the fire still glowed and tongues hadn't frozen yet. Tales of saints and sinners, of monsters in the woods, of strange lights in the sky, of people who wandered into the forest and never came back. These stories weren't entertainment. They were maps, warnings. In a world with no Google, no GPS, stories were survival. And maybe tonight someone whispered one into the darkness. Maybe someone in the room beside you murmured a tale to their child before the fire died. Maybe someone just told it to themselves as a ward against fear. The night is still full of them fears. Even when nothing stirs, even when the wind is soft, even when the fire is gone, especially then. And yet, you feel no fear, not tonight. Only a deep, quiet understanding of cold, of silence, of shared breath and heavy blankets and sleeping without sleeping. You breathe in, the air is sharp, but your lungs welcome it. It feels honest. You close your eyes again. Second sleep begins to draw you in fully this time. No more starts and stops. No more stiff limbs. Your body has done what theirs did. It has adjusted, hardened, accepted. You drift deeper past thought, past cold, past stone. You sleep as they did in a world not made for comfort, but for resilience. And the castle, vast and ancient, sleeps with you, not in silence, but in deep, ancient stillness, the kind that stretches across centuries, the kind that settles into stone and never quite leaves. Every wall, every floorboard, every iron latch on every wooden door remembers these nights. Nights like this one, when breath fogs the air, and sleep is not a gift, but a slow, cold ritual. You are far beneath the surface of waking now. Not quite dreaming, not quite aware, but your body remembers the cold even in sleep. It keeps you curled in on yourself, hands tucked between thighs, chin buried in the rough wool of your blanket. The stiff corners scratch your neck, but you don't care. Scratch is better than freeze. In this suspended state, the room feels endless. A single dark cube suspended in a castle that could be anywhere: Scotland, Normandy, Bohemia, Wales. Castles, despite their grandeur, all slept the same. Stone made sleep universal. You hear a sound again, not loud, just there. A faint scuffle, a muted cough, someone awake. Maybe it's the person sharing your bed. Maybe someone in the next room rising early to tend a fire. Maybe it's no one. Maybe it's the building itself. Yes, buildings make sounds. And in the Middle Ages, people believed that places absorbed memory. A castle was not inert. It breathed. It remembered. It mourned. That's why so many refused to sleep alone in certain rooms. There were tales of stone chambers that made men weep for no reason, of beds that brought fever, of walls that whispered back. But you're not afraid. The cold is too honest for fear. Besides, there are things to do come daylight. The castle is never still for long, and even in the final hours before dawn, things begin to move. A servant might creep in to collect the chamber pot. A stable boy might slip out into the yard to check on the horses. A cook might creep into the kitchen to bake the morning bread. And the baker's heat. Now that was the real prize. That fire burning for hours fed more than flour. It fed warmth to the lower rooms. Sometimes it reached as far as the great hall, and the floors above would feel a faint blush of heat, a breath of relief. But you're not near the kitchens. You're high up near the battlements. Your chamber is quiet, untouched by rising fires. If warmth comes, it will come from you and you alone. That's how it was for most. Even the nobles, with all their furs and draperies, knew that no castle could keep the cold out. That's why they layered clothing until they could barely bend their arms. That's why they built fires in every room and still didn't take their boots off. That's why they wore gloves to bed and hoods, and sometimes slept with dogs tucked into their legs. You smile slightly at that. The comfort dogs of the Middle Ages weren't pets as we know them. They were companions, yes, but more than that, they were tools of survival. Small lapdogs were common in noble households, not because of their charm, but because they radiated heat. A noblewoman might sleep with one under each arm like little breathing coals. Sometimes it made the difference between aching cold and bearable sleep. But most people didn't have dogs. They had each other, so beds were crowded. A mother might sleep with all her children under one blanket. A servant might curl at the foot of a lord's bed, not for punishment, but because it was warmer than the floor. In households with only 1 or 2 rooms, everyone slept in the same space and no one questioned it. The only rule was this: keep warm however you can. And you followed that rule well tonight. Even now in your half-dreaming state, your body knows what to do. Every limb is pulled inward. Your shoulders are hunched. Your breath is shallow to avoid pulling in too much frigid air. The wool is still rough, but you've gone numb to its scratch. It's become your shield, your tent, your second skin. Outside, you imagine the night is beginning to lighten. Not quite dawn, but close. The sky will shift from black to ink blue. The frost on the window shutters will glow faintly. Somewhere in the fields beyond the castle walls, the roosters will begin to crow. A bell might ring from the chapel. Not yet, but soon. And with that bell will come the stirrings of the castle. You'll hear doors creak open, firewood clatter into stone hearths, water splash into buckets. The first spoken words of the day, rough-tired, matter-of-fact. The sleep will drain out of the castle like fog from a valley. But not yet. You still have time. Just enough. Enough for the final stretch of sleep. Enough to imagine just for a moment that the room has grown warmer. Not from fire, but from memory. From the collective heat of all those who have slept here before. who have curled into this same corner, who have sighed into this same woolen blanket, who have waited for dawn. And with that thought, something softens inside you. You are not alone, not in this castle, not in this bed, not in this story. You are part of a long line of sleepers who closed their eyes against stone walls and hoped for morning. And that morning is coming. But for now you sleep. Not deeply, not sweetly, but completely. Wrapped in cold, in stillness, in centuries. And somewhere far off, the first bird sings. A single solitary note rising through the pre-dawn hush like the thin edge of a blade. It pierces the silence not to disturb it, but to announce something quietly profound. The night is beginning to let go. You don't wake, not fully, but your mind stirs. That bird call threads through your fading dreams, tugging gently at the corners of your awareness. You shift beneath the blanket again. It's no warmer. Your breath still fogs in the air. But something has changed. The weight of the night has lifted just slightly. The room, still wrapped in shadows, feels different now. The kind of different that doesn't come from temperature, but from time. The castle is beginning to breathe again. You can't see the light yet, but you can feel its approach. A softening of darkness, a loosening of the cold's grip. That deep, unbroken black begins to thin into something like charcoal gray. You listen. Nothing. Then a second bird joins the first, then a third. Outside the shuttered window, the trees must be trembling with the sound. In the forest, beyond the outer wall, the crows and sparrows begin their choir. Life reasserts itself, not loudly, but firmly. It insists on morning, and with that, the castle begins to wake. You hear it in pieces, a creak of floorboards in the room above, a muffled cough in the hall beyond your door. A clang far below, iron against stone, someone stoking a hearth. A bucket of water sloshing as it's lifted. These aren't just sounds, they're signs of survival. You made it through the night, and so did the castle. That's not a small thing. In this time, in this world, each morning was earned. Each night survived was a silent victory. You feel that truth settle in your chest, heavy and quiet. But still, you don't move. Not yet. Your body knows how to preserve what little warmth remains. You stay curled, cocooned. The scratchy blanket has molded to your shape again. The straw mattress beneath you, lumpy and uneven, has adjusted slightly under your weight. You're stiff. Your toes are numb. But you are still here. And for a few moments more, you can pretend it's still night. You think of the fire long gone now. You remember the hearth in the great hall, the way the light would dance on the stone walls when it was lit. A good fire was a miracle. Not just warmth, but life. Story. Safety. That's why it was sacred. Hearth and home. The center of every medieval life. You didn't build around the dining table. You built around the fire. And if the fire failed, so did everything else. You wonder if someone is lighting it now. Far below, in the vast, echoing kitchen, a cook may be kneeling beside the ash-coaxing flame from tinder with the first sparks of flint. It would be his duty, his burden. The coldest hour of the morning belonged to the firemaker, and eventually that heat would rise. It would reach the lower rooms first, the great hall, the pantry, the chapel. Slowly, reluctantly, it would creep up the stairwells, whisper under doors, slip through keyholes. And much later, maybe midday, it would reach your chamber. Maybe. But not yet. For now, the cold remains. But it's no longer the enemy. It's familiar now, honest, expected. And even in this earliest hour, people are moving. You can hear them more clearly now, boots on stone, voices low and clipped. A door creaks open, then slams. A latch clicks. There's a rhythm to it. The same as yesterday. The same as tomorrow. Sleep is no longer possible. Not truly. But still you lie there. Because moving hurts. You flex your fingers one at a time. They resist. Then tingle. Your feet are slow to respond. You wiggle them beneath the blanket. It's like waking from stone. Eventually you'll rise. You'll layer your clothing piece by piece, linen, wool, leather, fur. You'll light a candle or steal one from the hall. You'll open the shutters and let the morning air slap you awake. But not yet. This last part of the medieval night, the moment between sleep and duty, is precious. A breath held before the day exhales. You lie back again. Listen. The birds are louder now. The wind softer. The cold still there. Always there. But no longer a surprise. It's just part of life. And in this final moment of stillness, before the castle truly stirs, you understand something deeper. They didn't sleep in spite of the cold. They slept with it, through it, alongside it. It shaped them, humbled them, strengthened them. And now it has shaped you too. You made it through the night, not by conquering the cold, but by surrendering to it, by accepting the rhythms of a world where stone walls held no heat and blankets barely helped. And as the gray light of dawn finally begins to bleed through the cracks in the shutters, you rise slowly, stiffly, and wiser than you were the night before. You sit up slowly, like you're emerging from a different century. Every joint protests. Your neck is stiff. Your back creaks. Your fingers move like they're wrapped in ice. But you've survived the night. You don't think of it that way, not at first, but that's exactly what this was, survival. You swing your legs over the side of the bed. The stone floor is as cold as death. It feels like stepping onto frozen iron. You flinch instinctively and curl your toes, but there's no escaping it. You grab the edge of the blanket and drape it over your shoulders like a cloak. It's not elegant. It's not clean, but it holds the only warmth you have. The room around you is still dim, but not black anymore. The walls glow faintly with that uncertain early light, gray, grainy, and cold. You see the stone more clearly now. Not smooth, but rough-weathered, pitted by years of winter air and condensation. It's the kind of wall that doesn't just repel warmth, it consumes it. You step forward gingerly, making your way toward the shuttered window. Each step is cautious. The rushes on the floor have shifted during the night, and underneath them the stone is slick in places. Moisture seeps in through the walls. Always has. Always will. You undo the wooden latch with fingers that barely bend. The wood groans like an old man standing up from prayer. You ease the shutter open a sliver, and the cold hits you like a slap. But so does the light. It's morning. Pale, wintry daylight spills across the sill and cuts through the room in a thin line. You look out and see the castle courtyard below empty, except for a lone servant carrying firewood shoulders, hunched steam pouring from his mouth like smoke. The ground glistens with frost. The rooftops shimmer with a thin white crust. You can see the breath of every living creature, even from here. It's hard to believe life will resume in a place like this, that people will gather in the great hall, that the chapel will echo, with voices that children will run across those stones. Everything looks frozen, paused, brittle. But that's the miracle of medieval life. It keeps going, even when the world seems too cold to allow it. You close the shutter again. The wind's bite lingers on your face, but the blanket around your shoulders holds. You sit back down on the bed, not because you're tired, but because rising fully seems like too large a commitment. The castle may be waking, but you aren't ready to surrender your small corner of stillness. And as you sit there, something ancient flickers in the back of your mind. You realize that this rhythm of cold and waking and slow return to life was a constant for centuries. Generations lived like this. Generations died like this. No heated floors, no flannel sheets, no morning coffee to wrap your hands around. Just the rituals of warmth, fire breath, wool, closeness. And every morning began the same way, with the ache of waking, with the slow crawl out of layers, with the preparation for another day of toil and survival. This wasn't just a winter problem. In castles like this, even summer nights could be bitter. The thickness of the walls, the altitude of the towers, the way the stone absorbed coolness and clung to it, it made comfort an elusive thing. Warmth, real warmth, was reserved for those near kitchens, near fires, near other people. You in your chamber were alone, and yet you weren't. The echoes of all who came before you still linger here. You can feel them in the grooves of the stone floor, in the worn edge of the bed frame, in the scorched brick of the hearth. You glance at that hearth now, cold and gray. You imagine what it took to keep it burning through the night would labor attention. Most people didn't have the luxury. Wood was rationed. Fires were expensive. You didn't light one unless you needed it. And you didn't keep one unless you could afford the risk of it spreading or the expense of feeding it. So most slept in the cold. Night after night. Season after season, year after year, it shaped their bodies. Their bones grew hard and dense. Their skin roughened from dry wind and woolen abrasion. Their lungs filled with smoke in winter, with damp in spring. And their hearts learned to beat steadily through discomfort. That's the lesson of the cold in a place like this. It teaches you to endure. You stand again, wrapping the blanket tighter. You move slowly to the corner where a small basin of water waits. Someone filled it yesterday. Now the top is a thin disk of ice. You press a finger against it, and it cracks. The sound is delicate and crisp. You break the surface, splash the water onto your face, and gasp. The cold is sharper than a blade. It slaps you fully awake, but your breath steadies. Your chest rises and falls. You've begun the day, and through the open crack of the door, you hear it now. Life. A voice calling out in the corridor. Footsteps descending the stairs. A pot clanging below. The rustle of fabric. The clatter of iron. The day has begun for everyone. You dress quickly. Layers, always layers. Linen against skin, then wool, then something heavier if you're lucky. Your movements are stiff, robotic, but they improve with every minute. You are warming, not from heat, but from motion. You are awake now, truly. You step toward the door, and rest your hand against the wood. It's warm not from fire but from sunlight. The tiniest patch of it touches the surface. The sun is rising, and even if it won't make the stone walls melt, it signals something essential. Hope. The cold never wins completely. Not if you keep moving. Not if you keep waking. You breathe once more, long and slow, and open the door. The hallway is still shadowed, but the castle is stirring. And you, wrapped in history and wool and quiet defiance, step forward into the day. The hallway greets you with a breath of colder air than you expected, as if the castle itself is exhaling its long-held frost into your face. You pause, bracing against the chill. The stone beneath your feet is uneven, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. Your own bare steps now join theirs, a continuation of a ritual that hasn't changed in 1,000 years. You shuffle forward slowly. The torch sconces on the wall are empty, and blackened, their holders warped from long use. A few are lit farther down the hall, their flames trembling in the draft, casting moving shadows across the walls. You follow them like breadcrumbs, step by careful step. The castle at dawn is unlike the castle at night. It's no longer holding its breath. Now it stirs and grumbles. Below, deep in the kitchens, the clatter of pots begins in earnest. A burst of voices, low and groggy. Somewhere someone is hauling water. Somewhere someone else is sweeping rushes from the floor, with stiff bristles and a stiffer back. The castle is awakening in waves, noisy, chaotic waves. But it's not warm yet. That will take hours. You pass an open chamber door and glance in. A servant is helping a lady dress, layer by layer, shift by shift, the woman shivering with every motion, lips pursed in quiet irritation. Her hair is tangled with sleep. Her arms hug her chest. She doesn't speak, and the servant doesn't look up. The routine is ancient mechanical practiced. Further along, another chamber. 2 boys are pulling on boots beside a smoldering hearth. They slap their arms against their sides to get the blood moving. Their cheeks are red from the cold. One sneezes, and the other doesn't flinch. Just another winter morning. You keep walking. The air changes as you descend the spiral staircase. A little warmer, just slightly. Maybe it's the movement. Maybe it's your blood finally waking up. Or maybe it's hope. You follow the smell of ash and yeast drawn toward the scent of life resuming. When you reach the great hall, it's still mostly dark. Only a few candles flicker at one end. The long wooden tables are empty, but dusted with a fine frost that's gathered overnight. A servant moves between them with a bucket, scattering rushes across the floor, fresh ones, green with rosemary and sweet-smelling herbs. They'll mask the smells of the bodies soon to fill this space, of wool and mud and unwashed skin, of horses and firewood and garlic. It's not unpleasant. It's just real. It smells like life, like work, like survival. At the far end, someone is trying to relight the hearth. You watch as they crouch low, blowing gently into the stacked kindling. The sparks catch. Flame licks at dry sticks. There's a crack, a hiss, and then finally a blaze. Small but steady. Everyone in the room stops for just a second, glancing toward it. There it is. The day's first fire. You move closer almost without thinking. So does everyone else. A few workers sidle toward the hearth, pretending to inspect the stones, the benches, anything that lets them stand near that growing warmth. No one says it. No one has to. The fire is the castle's first prayer of the morning. You reach out your hands, and the heat hits you. It stings at first. Your fingers, numb for so long, don't know how to receive it. They tingle, then throb, then soften. It hurts, but it's the best kind of hurt. You breathe in the scent of burning wood. It's sharp, alive. The orange light dances on your skin, reminding you what it feels like to be warm. Truly warm. And standing there, you begin to understand why the medieval mind considered fire sacred. Why it was more than just a tool. Fire was a miracle, and everyone treated it like one. You didn't waste it. You didn't forget it. You fed it, protected it, shared it. Some castles even had firekeepers, servants, whose entire job was to tend the flames day and night. They were trusted with the life of the house. If a fire went out in the wrong room at the wrong time, people could die. And starting it again wasn't easy. Not with wet wood, damp kindling, shaking hands. You think back to your room, to the dead hearth in the corner, to the stone that radiated nothing. And you realize how precious this little flame in the great hall truly is. Around you, others begin to speak softly, the first murmurs of the day. A boy coughs. A woman sneezes. Someone laughs briefly, quietly. Life is happening again. And soon the hall will be full. Pages carrying trays. Knights strapping on swords. Lords barking orders. Dogs chasing scraps. But for now, there's only this little circle of firelight, shared by a handful of figures with cold feet and tired eyes. You sit on the bench closest to the hearth. It creaks beneath you. The warmth seeps into your bones, slowly, gratefully. You let your hands hover above the flame and watch the light ripple over your knuckles, your wrists, your arms. You don't speak. You just breathe. And for the first time in what feels like forever, your breath doesn't fog the air. You smile. Not wide. Just enough. This is how they survived. Not with comfort. Not with blankets. With fire. With motion. With ritual. With each other. You sit in silence and feel it. The deep-earned joy of morning heat. The kind you can only understand after a night like the one you've just lived. And behind you in the high rafters, pigeons stir. The castle lives again. And so do you. The warmth of the hearth begins to spread through your limbs like honey. Not fast, not complete, but enough to remember what comfort might feel like. Enough to loosen your jaw, relax your shoulders, unclench your fists. The pain fades into something softer, and your breath no longer comes in tight clouds. You sit still for a long moment, soaking in the firelight, watching it flicker and dance on the ancient stones of the hall. Shadows stretch and sway on the wall behind you, tall and thin, and shifting, like they've got a mind of their own. It's almost like the fire is alive, not just heat, but movement presence. And in a way it is. That fire will dictate the rest of your day. It will bake the bread, heat the stew, warm the tools, dry the boots, soften the wax for sealing letters, melt the tallow for candles. Everything starts with fire. Without it, the castle stops. and you, like everyone else, would return to the night's freeze even in the middle of the day. A servant approaches the hearth holding a heavy black pot with both hands. She nods to you, wordlessly crouches, and hangs it from the iron hook above the flame. The pot creaks on the chain, swinging slightly. Inside porridge, you guess. Thick, bland, and steaming. The smell is faint, but enough to remind you that your stomach exists. You haven't eaten since yesterday, and your body knows it. It's not hunger in the way you know it now. It's deeper, more like a hollowness behind your ribs, a low echo that pulses with each heartbeat. The kind of hunger that doesn't demand, just waits. Patient, resigned. Food will come. Not a feast, just enough. A small wooden bowl may be handed down the line. No spoon unless you're someone important. Just your fingers or a crust of bread for scooping. It will be hot, and that will be all that matters. You glance around the hall again. More people are gathering now. A man dragging in a bundle of kindling. 2 boys whispering by the tapestries. An old woman with a mop and a crooked back shuffling across the rush-covered floor. The fire has become the heart of it all, the magnetic center. And you realize this too was part of medieval sleep. Not just the night, not just the bed, but this waking ritual. The aching limbs, the silent walk through the halls, the shared fire, the thin porridge, the slow return of blood to your hands. You stretch your fingers, now flex them in the heat. They're red and raw, but they move. That's enough. You tuck your feet beneath you on the bench, closer to the flames. There's no need for speech here. Everyone understands. Everyone has passed through the same night wrapped in their own patchwork of sleep and cold. And just beyond the hall's open arch, the courtyard is waking too. You rise from your seat and drift toward it, the blanket still wrapped over your shoulders like a cape. A few others do the same, moving quietly, drawn to the light. You step outside and stop. The air is still bitter, sharp as ever. But it's filled with light now. Not golden light, not yet. But clean, crisp, honest. The frost has not melted, but it glitters. Every stone, every timber beam, every slate tile sparkles under the gray-blue dawn. You can see your breath again, but this time it's not a threat, just a fact. A boy leads a horse from the stables, steam pouring from its nostrils. A girl pours water into a trough, gasping as her hands touch the icy rim. The blacksmith's apprentice hammers at the shop door, his breath billowing like smoke. All around you, people begin their day with the same quiet understanding. The cold is not going anywhere, but neither are they. You stand there, arms folded inside the blanket, watching it all. And you think again of sleep. How different it is here. Not a soft landing, not an escape, not an indulgence. Sleep is work. You prepare for it like you would a task. You survive it like you would a trial. You wake from it sore but proud. There's no waking up refreshed in a place like this. Only waking up alive. And yet in that there's something beautiful, something resilient. You return to the hall just as the first bowls are being passed out. The smell of oats and wood smoke clings to the air. You take your seat by the fire again. Someone hands you a chunk of dark bread, dense, rough, a little burnt. You take it without words. It's warm from the pot. You eat slowly, carefully. Your fingers are clumsy, your teeth ache from the cold, but each bite reminds you you're here. You made it. And when the bowl is empty and the bread is gone, the castle begins to call again. Tasks await, duties beckon. The rhythm of the day marches forward. But in the quiet beneath all that bustle, you carry something no one can see. The knowledge of the night, of what it took to lie still in a freezing bed with no blanket, of how to warm your hands without a fire, of how to listen to the wind without fear, and how to wake up anyway. This is how they lived. And now, for a little while, so have you. You rise once more from the bench, your muscles now looser than they were just an hour ago. The fire has done its work, not just on your fingers and toes, but on your breath, your bones, your very mood. You can feel the night's weight lifting off you like a heavy cloak. You made it. The castle by now is fully alive. Footsteps echo up and down the stairwells. Boots scuff against stone. Buckets slosh with icy water. Commands are called down hallways. The great doors to the outside creak open, and the cold rushes in again. But no one flinches. Everyone knows this cold. It's the same cold that wrapped you in sleep, hovered in your breath, and coated the walls of your chamber with frost. It's no longer a surprise. It's just part of life. You pass through the great hall, watching life unfold in practiced rhythms. The household moves like a single living thing. The cooks in the kitchen shout orders. The steward reads aloud a list of supplies. The chambermaids carry linens and pails, eyes low, fingers red. Everyone is moving, working, enduring. And you realize this has always been the pattern. Sleep in the cold, wake in the cold, work in the cold. In medieval castles, warmth was a visitor, not a resident. A flicker of heat from a hearthstone. A rare patch of sun on a southern-facing window. A shared body beside you in bed. Nothing lasted. So you learn to stretch it, carry it with you. You glance out an arched window as you pass. The frost has begun to recede in the sunlight. Tiny droplets glisten on the glassless frame. Outside the stable, hands lead horses to water. The dogs run, barking through the mud, and smoke curls from a half-dozen chimneys. It's not warm yet, not even close. But it's enough. And now your thoughts return to the night. You recall how slowly sleep came and how shallow it stayed. The ache in your joints. The feeling of the blanket pressed tight against your chin. The breath you held as you lay still, trying to preserve what little warmth you had. The silence that wasn't silent at all. The wind in the shutters. The creak of stone. The whisper of straw shifting under you. You remember waking in the dark, unsure if you'd slept at all. You remember the chamber unmoved and unkind. You remember the second sleep, that strange gray drifting, and the knowledge impossible to forget that the fire had died and left you to fend for yourself. But more than that, you remember the slow victory of morning. That moment when your feet first found warmth again. That first spoon of porridge. That first breath of air that didn't sting your throat. That small, unspoken relief shared by every soul in the castle who had made it through another night. This wasn't a hardship for them. Not really. It was just life. And you feel it now in your bones. The way they must have. The way their children did. The way sleep was shaped not by comfort, but by endurance. You pass a servant now carrying an armload of kindling up toward the upper chambers. No doubt she's preparing for the next night already. Fires must be set. Beds must be shaken out. The straw must be restuffed. The day has only just begun, but already it prepares for the cold to return. Because it will. Tonight again the fire will fade. The air will turn to ice. The walls will breathe cold against your cheeks. The bed will be no warmer than it was last night. But you'll be ready. You know how to curl tightly beneath the blanket, how to breathe shallow, how to listen to weight to slip between wakefulness and sleep without panic. You know how to accept the cold without fearing it. And in that you've joined them not just as a visitor to their world, but as one of them. You move through the castle now with new eyes. You see not just the frost on the stone, but the stories in it. The thousands of nights survived. The quiet, stubborn resistance of human beings learning how to sleep in places that should not allow sleep. You return to your chamber one last time before the midday meal. The shutters are still closed, the hearth still dark. You cross the floor, slowly trailing your fingers along the stone wall, feeling its ancient chill. You look at the bed, lumpy, sagging, waiting. You smile. It doesn't look cruel anymore. It looks honest. You run your hand along the rough wool blanket, and know tonight, you'll do it again. You'll climb into that bed, curl up against the chill, listen to the breath of the castle, drift, wake, drift again, and sleep not to escape but to endure. And in doing so, you'll touch a truth deeper than time. That warmth when it comes means more when you've earned it. That sleep when it finally finds you is sweeter when you know what it cost. That survival itself is a kind of peace. And as you step back into the hall, the cold trailing behind you, like a memory, the castle exhales once more. The fire crackles in the distance, and the day carries you forward. Take one last breath with me now. Let it out slow. You've wandered through the frost-bitten halls of a medieval castle, seen the coals fade in the hearth, felt the scratch of wool and the ache in cold bones. You've curled into that ancient bed layered in linen and silence, hearing the castle settle and the wind whisper secrets through the shutters. And now the world you've traveled through grows quiet once more. The sounds of footsteps fade. The fire has dimmed to a whisper. The frost outside melts gently in the dawn sun. You've lived their night, their chill, their quiet triumph. And now it's your turn to sleep. Let the stillness of those stone walls settle into your chest. Let your own breath slow, steady, soft. There is no rush now, nothing more to endure. You've already made it. Feel the weight of the blanket, real or imagined, drape over you. Let it hold you. You are warm enough. You are safe enough. You are still. And as the last echoes of the castle fade into silence, your eyes begin to close. Let them. Let the world blur. Let time stretch. Let sleep come. Not in a rush. Not all at once. Just in slow, gentle waves. You've earned this rest. You are not alone in it. You are part of something timeless now. So sleep, traveler. Sleep.